Bon, aujourd'hui on fait les journées du patrimoine avec Samir
et Fabrice.
Voilà, messieurs, ça consiste en quoi exactement?
Alors c'est un tour en 1h30 qui vous permet de découvrir l'héritage Disney, vous fait découvrir les métiers Disney également, parce que vous avez 500 métiers, et également certains métiers très rares, à peu près 30, une trentaine. Et donc pendant 1h30, il y a tout un parcours qui vous fait découvrir l'héritage Disney, certains trésors Disney, avec toutes les informations inédites parfois, qui vous permettent justement de découvrir Disney.
Extraordinaire. Merci.
Donc venez nous voir pour la prochaine peut-être journée du patrimoine.
Avec grand plaisir.
Et puis à bientôt sur la chaîne Allaroundisney.
Merci messieurs. Merci. Très bonne journée en tout cas.
Très bonne journée.
Merci à vous. Au revoir. Au revoir.
La première fois, Disneyland Paris participa aux Journées européennes du patrimoine, de manière à célébrer son propre patrimoine. Sous réservation, vous pouviez avoir une visite guidée du parc avec un guide qui vous emmenait tout d'abord par les Fantasia Gardens, puis ensuite sur Main Street, Discoveryland, Fantasyland et enfin finissait devant le château. Il nous emmenait à travers tous les endroits qui étaient d'influence européenne pour Disneyland Paris et qui étaient donc en lien avec les Journées du patrimoine.
So welcome to Discoveryland, the land of visionaries, the future. Our Discoveryland here is obviously very unique, that's a fact, and you can see that in the architecture and the landscape, and that's really inspired dreamers and designers from both sides of the pond. Talking about Leonardo da Vinci, when we appreciate our magnificent Orbitron attraction, which is really the central focal point of Discoveryland. This is directly a representation of the symbols and the drawings that he made of the solar system. And in fact, on the attraction itself, you can see a quote in Italian, "Il sole non si muove," meaning the sun does not move. This is a really innovative thing that he said, and it's something that he wrote in his notebooks numerous times for 40 years before Copernicus. But what has this got to do with France, I think you ask? Well, in fact, it was in France where Leonardo da Vinci finished some of his final inventions and his final discoveries for his friend King Francis I, and he's actually buried there near the Château d'Amboise. But what would be Discoveryland without the great visionary Jules Verne? And in fact, just here on your right hand side on the decorative panel, you will see a beautiful quote from the Nantes-born writer. It says, "All that is in the realms of the possible must and will be accomplished." And this is actually lifted from his 1880 novel, The Steam House, travels through northern India, in which the protagonist, Colonel Munro, is travelling on a steam train, which is in the form of an elephant. It's a very elaborate steam train with 2 luxury carriages behind it. And the beauty of this train is that it didn't need railway tracks in order to move, and it was completely amphibious. So this is an idea, a very imaginative idea that Walt also shared, called the plausible impossible, and it's something he actually spoke about in a program released on ABC on the 31st of October 1956. It really means that anything is possible. All of your dreams can come true, even if it be through novels and animated films. We're going to go a little bit further and talk a little bit more about this philosophy in terms of Space Mountain. Let's move on a little bit. So here we are in front of Hyperspace Mountain. This is obviously a reference to the Jules Verne novel From the Earth to the Moon from 1865. It's really retro-futurist in style, and you can see that from the outside, all of the metal bolts that are connected directly to the mountain, and then there's all different celestial images, spaces and moons that also decorate it. In fact, in the novel, it was the Baltimore Gun Club that decided that they wanted to send men off into space, but with contemporary materials. So in order to break through the Earth's atmosphere, they used a very powerful cannon, which was called the Columbiad. It used a similar cannon here for Space Mountain to send our astronauts off into space. So the outside hasn't really changed much, but the inside obviously has. In total, the mountain measures over 35 meters in height, 60 meters in diameter. And so the outside is very much Jules Verne, but the inside, since 1995, has changed numerous times. From references from the Earth to the Moon, it's Space Mountain From the Earth to the Moon, to Journeys to the Edges of the Galaxy in Space Mountain Mission 2, and then now to a journey and discovery on a galaxy far, far away with Hyperspace Mountain. So of course we're now, the inside of the attraction is paying homage to a new type of visionary, and a visionary from 1977, and that's the Star Wars universe of George Lucas. So the outside, as I say, it stayed pretty much the same, and it's still pure Jules Verne, and you can clearly see the Columbiad cannon. So Jules Verne himself was obviously a great visionary, very much like Leonardo da Vinci that we've already seen. And we know this because in his novel, he actually placed and built the Columbiad cannon in Florida. And where was it? On which we launched the first astronauts into space for the very first spacewalk in 1969, but with Florida. So of course he could really see things from into the future, from way, way back in the past. Another great reference to Jules Verne work in this area is to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And you can see that Captain Nemo's submarine takes pride of place here behind me in the lagoon. And he's just waiting for his next marine adventure. In order to create this attraction, it took a lot of work, especially on the very peculiar and minute details. And in order to create it, we actually brought in an external designer called Paul Sherman, who was a film set designer. And he spent his life, or dedicated to his life, to really exploring the Nautilus in minute detail. And he even went so far as turning his house, his entire home, into what resembled a submarine. While he was working with other Imagineers, he created no fewer than 250 sketches dedicated to different aspects of the attraction, from Captain Nemo's room with its contemporary pieces, to the great organ that takes pride of place in the central room. We're going to carry on a little bit further to what we saw earlier, which was the Hyperion spaceship, and we'll just talk about that in a little bit more detail. So we're going to head over to your left-hand side. So you can just see behind me a full-size version of the Hyperion airship that we already saw in the Discovery Arcade. So in order to create this here, we actually took inspiration both from the novel itself and from the movie, which was the Walt Disney adaptation. Everything that you can see was actually created by computer at first, and it was creating lifting films and images directly from the film. But our Imagineers really wanted to push this further, and they actually went so far as creating a little bit of extra adventure and extra stories in terms of the design of Videopolis, which is the building behind it. So if you go inside, it actually resembles a kind of boarding area if you were in an airport. And the panels above the counters represent the different destinations that you can actually visit in the airship. So there the airship you can see is all ready to go. On the bottom, different kinds of containers and suitcases. And as we walk past, you can take notice there is actually carrier pigeons, and they're a really good example of audio animatronics, which we're not going to go into too much detail of today. But it's obviously something that runs through many of our different attractions here at Disneyland Paris. And it's a subtle yet really interesting and traditional idea that you can see that not many people would notice. You can hear them and you can see them moving. So you can take a note of that as we walk past. But for now we're actually leaving Discoveryland. Enjoy the architecture, the volcanic feel of here, which was actually inspired by two other Jules Verne novels. Journey to the Centre of the Earth and The Mysterious Island, and it actually gives the feel that we're almost in the centre of the crater of a volcano, and the attractions, the restaurants and the boutiques are rising up from there. So have a look at that as we move from Discoveryland and head towards Fantasyland, which is where we're headed to now. Little fairy tales, and what better introduction than the It's a Small World attraction. And it's actually a more focused, concentrated version of all of the different cultures that we're going to experience and see a little bit as we make our way through Fantasyland. There are actually 30 different monuments represented on the outside of this attraction. And you can see the Eiffel Tower, which is in gold, just on the right-hand side of the clock. There's Big Ben, and also the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And these were all designed in the style of Mary Blair, who was actually the artistic director who created the very first entrance of the It's a Small World attraction that was created for the New York World Fair of 1964. Probably seen as we've been walking through on our way here, Fantasyland really goes to town when it comes to vegetation. We have different kinds of waterways that sneak and shape the area, and this is actually a reference to the European Renaissance tradition that began in the Renaissance. You can also see examples of this at Versailles, in Italy, and also in England at Longley, which is in the southwest. And that's where we took direct inspiration when we were creating our Alice's Curious Labyrinth. So our horticulture department opted for something called Leylandai when they were choosing what to use to create this unique maze. All of the hedges are cut twice a year, in April and in August, and our gardeners have to use stilts in order to reach the highest areas of the maze, but also to get a good view of exactly what they're working on to make sure that all of the shapes correspond. As we go past, you'll see that the Alice's Curious Labyrinth has a big Cheshire cat head, and in fact the hedges below it make up the shape of his body, which is something you can't necessarily see from here, but if you were to get a bird's eye view, you can kind of see the full shape of the cat at the bottom. Just another subtle thing that's kind of hidden that doesn't really know about, but it's just an extra detail that our Imagineers has put in to really embrace the feeling and the magical atmosphere of Fantasyland. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges for our our designers, our Imagineers, was to create a faithful but also detailed enough interpretation of the different types of European architecture. In order to do this, they took a lot of inspiration from the Disney Studios animators. For example, you can see that the lines are quite soft and curvy, and that creates movement. And also they employed what we call the squash and stretch technique, which is also known as force perspective. You may have seen examples of this as we were walking up Main Street USA, but you can also see an example of it here behind me, where the top level, the second level of the Auberge de Saint-Brieuc, the window is slightly smaller. It gives you the impression that the building is much larger than it actually is. So we're now here in Castle Courtyard, which is the area dedicated to France, both in a historical way with the Carrousel de Lancelot, but also in an architectural type of way. For example, with the clock tower that you see on the right hand side, which is inspired by that in Ribeauvillé in Alsace. But also we have different references to French culture, notably with the Auberge de Saint-Brieuc, with the Confiserie des Trois Fées, and also with Sleeping Beauty Castle herself, which are all inspired by stories from the French writer Charles Perrault. So in a similar vein, we also have the obviously different types of architecture related to the Middle Ages, and that can be represented by the Carrousel de Lancelot. I know you can't really see it very well today, however you can see the small pictures and the panels just on the top of the carousel. This is a reference to the stories of Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, which is written by the French poet Chrétien de Troyes, and other different various Arthurian legends. And in the drawings you can see depictions of his great deeds. Also the horses themselves, in fact there's no two horses the same on this carousel. The mane and the tail were all gilded by hand with 18-karat gold leaf by our artisans. Also in that kind of sense, if I talk about la Ménagerie du Royaume, which is also known as Sir Mickey's store, you can find different references to the Middle Ages and this type of architecture, for example armour, crests, swords, different details inside, but also the pièce de résistance, which is the stained glass storefront. And you can see this kind of stained glass artwork in different lights, windows and decorations throughout the park. These are created by special Disney technicians. They make up of over 40 different traditional and rare skills that are respected and represented here at Disneyland Paris. And they work alongside over 250 different technicians that work in our central workshops and also backstage. And they also work here directly on the work itself. Our stained glass artists actually import the panes, the slabs of glass directly from master glass makers. And they come from the Loire region. And then they're painted with a grey pigment or an oxide to create special effects. And then traditional methods are used to set it with lead. And the beauty of these kind of stained glass windows, much like the ones that we saw at the Liberty Court earlier, is that if you come out at any different time of the day, the effect of the sun reflecting through the windows gives a completely different feel and a different atmosphere. And it really represents the feel that we wanted to get when we were designing and building Fantasyland. We're now going to talk a little bit more about this French area represented here in Fantasyland. We're going to go into the courtyard of the Auberge de Saint-Brieuc. If you'd like to follow me. you very much for being interested in this event. I really hope it comes back next year. And thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you. It was really good. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions at all? You can come and ask me later. If you do have any questions after the tour, if you think about anything, usually in your confirmation letter, you have an email address. You can contact our department, the Heritage Department, who can give you extra details. And we also have a flyer that my friend Charlotte is going to give you now. On there you can find information about our application that you can download that's only available this weekend, and it's been designed only for this weekend. And it's just a little bit of an extra tool that you can follow with your telephone, with a little bit of extra details and some games.
Thank you.
Charlotte has a little present for you if you want to go and see her now. Thank you everyone.
Voilà, on vient de terminer donc la visite du patrimoine Disney. Donc on nous a remis un plan avec une application à télécharger. Tu montres Victor, s'il te plaît. Donc vous la téléchargez sur votre, je sais pas si on voit, voilà, sur votre téléphone. Et donc après il y a, je vais vous montrer, une carte. Et en fait il y a tout un système interactif qui vous permet en fait d'avoir des informations et de faire le tour du parc de façon très ludique. Voilà, c'est très sympathique. Malheureusement, c'était que samedi et dimanche pour les journées du patrimoine, mais au vu du succès, je pense que ça va refaire l'année prochaine. À la fin du tour, on nous remet cette magnifique petite chose ici qui a été fait spécialement pour les journées du patrimoine et qui ne sera remis qu'aujourd'hui. Donc on est extrêmement content de l'avoir eu. Voilà, c'est superbe.